I was definitely aware of who Dave was as an artist. I remember seeing his bands Alert and Swivel at the Red Barn. That was some of the first live hardcore music that I'd ever experienced.
Can you feel the pain? Burning, searing pain. The God that always...
It was absolutely inspirational to me in the formation of Cave-In. When Cave-In was in a pretty pivotal transition point where we had lost two of our founding members, I think through these mutual friends, the conversation of getting together with Dave came up, and Dave had a ferocious vocal style, and he was from Methuen, so it pretty much checked all the boxes for us at that time. Dave also had this cool sort of visual eye for things through the demos that he designed, the flyer art that he made. And I just thought that would be so cool to bring into Cave-In because we never had a strong sort of visual theme or aesthetic in the early days. At the beginning of 1998, that's when the writing for what became Until Your Heart Stops really started to ramp up, and coincidentally that's also when the personality clashes and the weirdness between the band and Dave really started to come to the surface. Me, JR, and Adam, we've known each other since middle school. We're just a few months apart in age. We're a lot like brothers. And for Dave to be coming into this sort of world that we had and trying to find his footing, I'm sure it was tough. He was honing his craft and he was trying to find his thing for Cave-In. He was taking his time. But as far as we were concerned, we wanted to be out there doing this ASAP, working with Hydra Head. They were stoked on us. We were stoked on them. We had our sights set for making a record in the spring of 1998 and then touring on it in the summer of that same year. So we just didn't feel like that was going to materialize with Dave. I'm just very happy that we have this document of Until Your Heart Stops, the nuts and bolts of it, the demos with Dave. We were able to work together on creating this cool package for people to check out, and I think fans of the record are going to flip over it. And I'm sure a lot of people don't even know that Dave had a pretty significant involvement in the record. He really did light a fire under our asses in many ways.
When the album came out, I think Aaron Turner gave me a copy of it just so I could check it out. And I remember really liking it. It was like I was kind of blown away by how it sounded. The recording at God City, it just sounded huge. It was big and fire-breathing, and the production was great, and all of the soundscapes that Jay Randall provided, like everything, it just seemed like a complete work.
So we have a history. My old band Gambit used to play a lot with them, Piebald, Opposition, Bound, Converge, places like North Andover, Red Barn. I released their first 7-inch. Dave Scrod, who would go on to become their vocalist on the Beyond Hypothermia album, usually live with my family. My mom used to give Dave rides back and forth to work every day. I think I met the Cave-In guys when they were still in high school, and I don't know if Adam knows this or not, but he actually worked in the Newbury Comics warehouse with my fiance. So yeah, we have a history.
Juggernaut was recorded at an early version of God City Studios by Kurt Ballou for the sessions that were demos for what was to become the Until Your Heart Stops album. And I remember being 0% prepared to record vocals for that song. We had never played it live, I don't recall ever playing that song live. And I remember during the writing process for that song, just watching Steve and Adam go back and forth with all the crazy guitar parts. I was really hoping that song would get scrapped, because the more it progressed, the more I realized how just completely fucked I was when it came time to put words to this song. And by the time we went to the studio, I didn't have actual lyrics prepared. I had kind of a loose version of the lyrics prepared that were basically pulled from various spots in my notebook. It was more of a sketch than anything. And I remember just thinking to myself, I'm just gonna pull shit out of the air off the cuff and while we're recording it. I remember going in with kind of a printed out lyric sheet. These were the loose lyrics. I knew where I wanted certain words to be and where I wanted certain phrases to be. And I also remember frantically scribbling things like right before I recorded my vocal track. And I really think that added to the uneasy feeling of that song. That song just, even listening back to it now, 25 years later, it brings me back to just this uneasy feeling that was in the studio. And being able to actually harness that and produce a very unsettling sounding song. There's somewhere right around the 4-minute mark where I just scream, "There's no peace here." And I remember saying it, I remember screaming it, and it being in the, and making it into the song. It wasn't mixed out or anything. And I remember that was just kind of a reaction of what was going on around me. There was no settling feeling of anything that was going on, because there always seemed to be this big nasty monster dressed in an elephant suit sitting in the corner of the room, no matter where we were at that point in the band. And it really came through in how those demo recordings sound. And I think it lasted into the actual album, Until Your Heart Stops. After I was no longer in the band, Cave In just had this gnarliness about them that wasn't really there before. It was angry and it was kind of gross, but in a good way. And I think those demo sessions were important because it started to show this kind of gritty side of the band that I always wanted. I kind of wanted to bring that grittiness out when I joined the band without forcing it, and it just kind of happened. And I'm glad we were able to harness that tension, because that song is a ripper. Even though I had a hard time with it, it's a total ripper from start to finish. Ebola was recorded at Bernard Studio in Ayer, Massachusetts, at the recommendation of Jay Randall, who had recorded some of his various noise projects there. We were looking for a studio to just go into and have it be easy and cheap and kind of fast, to do the re-recorded versions for Beyond Hypothermia. And we also had a couple of new songs, Ritual Famine being one of them, and Crambone and the Metallica medley that was at the end of the record. We had some extra time, so we just kind of threw Ebola in there just to get it down on tape. It had been a song that we were playing live quite a bit. It was the first song that came to be after I joined the band, and it came together pretty quickly. I remember it being called Ebola because it was tuned to E flat, and the flat symbol looks like a little B. So we referred to it as E flat. It was just like, let's play E flat. And that quickly evolved into Ebola. There was also this kind of an inside joke within the band members. If you had an overbearing girlfriend or boyfriend or significant other, we would refer to that as having Ebola. Like, I can't hang out tonight, I have Ebola. Or like, I'd love to come to your party, man, but I have Ebola. Ebola. And what started out as a funny concept, you know, it was like it was an inside joke. It was funny. The lyrics for that song ended up being pretty dark. It was at the time, it was like, damn, those lyrics are really dark, you know. Listening back to them now, it's like it's a pretty dark, kind of spiteful song. It wasn't really intended to be that way, but it's gnarly, so it works. Another song that ended up on the Until Your Heart Stops album that we never recorded a demo for or anything. It wasn't even written until right before the album came out, was Controlled Mayhem, Then Erupts. And that song, Steve and I had come up with the idea for that song early on. I remember Steve was over my apartment one night and we were watching one of those TV shows that were like one of those, not really reality shows, it was kind of pre-reality TV. It was the late 90s, and there were all these shows all over TV that were like, we would refer to them as like just the people eating shit show or whatever, you know, where it was like, here's people getting attacked by animals, or like nature's going apeshit, or like stuff's blowing up. There was always this narrator. And it seemed like it was the same narrator for every single show. I don't know if it was or not, and there was always some catchphrase that the narrator would pull out just as shit was starting to pop off. And I remember we were watching this show one time, and I forget if it was they were demolishing a building or whatever, and right as the building started to crumble, the narrator just said, "Controlled Mayhem, Then Erupts," and then all these bricks started flying around and people started getting fucked up and hurt, and I just remember Steve and I looking at each other, and there was just kind of this light bulb that was like, that's a great song title. So I had this idea for a song, and Steve liked it and Adam liked it, you know, everybody was kind of on the same page. It was a cool title, and it ended up being the working title of an upcoming album. That was going to be the title of our album. And because of that, it was probably unjustified, but I felt this crazy amount of pressure to create this magnum opus kind of thing. And I put way too much effort into trying to write just like the perfect lyrics and all this stuff. And I was basically putting all my eggs in one basket. And I wrote way too many lyrics for the song. And I realized even at the time that it was crazy that I was putting so much effort into writing one song, because I was probably going to have to come up with lyrics for 8 or 9 other songs that were going to be on the album. And every time we would play Until Your Heart Stops live, which we played it a lot, the song had different lyrics. And sometimes it had no lyrics at all. Sometimes I remember a couple shows where I just hurled myself at the floor and fucking yelled nonsense because that's what was in my brain. And I know that caused a lot of frustration in the band. Nobody knew if the song had lyrics. Nobody, you know, everyone was like, why isn't he writing lyrics for this song? And every time we play it, it's different. And after a while, I finally had worked out what I thought were the perfect lyrics for this song after scribbling about 700 different versions in this exact notebook right here, which I still have. The notebook, what I lovingly refer to as the Until Your Heart Stops Chronicles, featuring all 700 versions of lyrics to Until Your Heart Stops, the song, not the entire album, just one song, until I finally settled on this final version. The Until Your Heart Stops Chronicles, on sale now at a newsstand near you. And by the time we recorded the demo for it, I was really happy with the lyrics, but I realized that the tensions in the band, and there was a lot of weirdness starting to happen, and it almost seemed like we were looking at each other from afar, even when we were in the same room. And I knew right then that things weren't going to end with us being together. And we were recording these demos, and I kind of, when I was recording Until Your Heart Stops, I knew at the time that I was singing it that it was probably going to be the last recording that I made with Caven. I remember being happy with the way the song came out, and I was so relieved to finally get the song out of me and get it down just right. Like it was just how I wanted the song to be. But I realized at the time too that it was unfortunate that people probably weren't going to hear it because it was a demo, and it was a demo for an album that was coming up that I probably wasn't going to be on. So I do think it's cool that it's finally kind of coming to light. I'm sure people have heard it. I'm sure different versions of it have been passed around on the internet or whatever. But it's definitely cool that people are finally going to get to hear this song 25 years later, because I am proud of it. It's probably the thing that that I feel the most comfortable. Like, yeah, that's the song that I like gave it my all with Cave In. I wish a better version could have come out, but I'm happy with the demo version, and I'm glad that people are finally going to get to hear it. All I can really say about that, to sum it up, is I had a very small part in the concept of that album. I named a couple of songs, I did the demos. It is what it is, and it was what it was. But to sum it all up, I can just say that if I did anything to sort of influence or even be indirectly responsible for a few teaspoons of the piss and vinegar that album is drenched in, then I guess I did my part.